And then fast forward 5, 6, 7 years, I'm now dean of a medical school with massive imposter syndrome, and most of the time look at the label on the door and wonder who on earth it is. But yeah, that's kind of the potted history.
Wow. I mean, one thing that really stands out for me is that level of insight that you must have had for yourself, that actually you needed to step out of that treadmill of conventional training. And a lot of us don't have that. And we feel, and actually there's a lot of rhetoric around medical training, that you have to be a registrar, get a training number, be a consultant. And it still exists today. And there's a lot of negative narrative around being a SAS doctor. Have you experienced that personally?
Yeah, it's such an insightful statement, Amie. And I really, really struggled with the idea of resigning a training number, because my entire time, both at medical school and as what was then a junior doctor, now of course a resident doctor, there was this expectation that you CCT'd and you became a GP or you became a consultant. And those were the options. And so suddenly to take a path that was slightly different was really terrifying, because I was really very anxious about how people would perceive me. And particularly thinking about wanting to have a leadership career, I didn't know whether I was almost sabotaging my own career before it had even started. But I think you're right, sort of the opportunity I had to reflect. And I think particularly doing a PhD, where really you spend at least 3 years really, really reflecting about everything, sort of realised that I wasn't going to go back into training and be happy. And ultimately it became a decision about, well, what's better, take a risk and be happy about it, or be a bit miserable and do what everyone expects? So I took a risk, and for me it's absolutely paid off, but it's not been easy. And I do remember quite vividly speaking to a pretty senior consultant at a national meeting and explaining what I was doing. And they just looked at me like I'd grown an extra head, as in, why on earth have you done that? You're never going to get to be dean of a medical school. And I do quite wish I could just call them up now and say, actually, I did it. Definitely a degree of stubbornness there. And I also remember, even being dean of a medical school, before I worked here in another dean role, speaking to a member of staff who basically, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, said, "It's great to have you here, but it's such a shame you're not a consultant." And so there are still very much those attitudes that sadly people perceive CCTs as being the currency by which you prove your worth. And I guess partly because of being stubborn, I'm determined to show that isn't the case. But also we know that more and more people are making really positive choices to be SAS doctors, having hugely fulfilled careers. And actually, the wonderful thing about doctors is we're a hugely diverse bunch. And so the more diversity you can get in, I think the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just to reflect on the fact that what we don't often do as doctors is really recognise that our own happiness is really important. And when we are happy inside, our ability as a doctor is so much better. And we're driven by these external pressures, aren't we, to be CCT or, be a consultant. And, hands down, what you did was incredible. And thank you for showing us an alternative route, because actually we don't talk about it often enough. Throughout that, when you were making those decisions, did you ever worry about how you'd be perceived and that you'd stand out and be treated differently?
Yes. And I think you sort of learn to embrace it, because actually one of the things I realised was that by being a bit different, it makes you memorable. And actually being memorable sometimes when you're trying to forge a leadership path can be quite useful. But I suppose I have to recognise that I was in still a very privileged position as a white male UK trained middle class graduate, where actually I didn't have the systemic disadvantage that many other colleagues, particularly in SAS doctor roles, have. And I think particularly when you look at the SAS doctor cohort, which is, wonderfully diverse, often contains higher proportions of international medical graduates and those from ethnic minorities than perhaps the broader population of resident doctors and other groups of doctors. I suppose that made it easier for me. And I would be lying if I said that I thought it would be the same for everyone, unfortunately. So, yes, I was always worried. I suppose at the back of my mind, the backup plan was always to go back in to a training post. And how easy that would have been, I don't know. But I also, have to be honest about the privilege that I had that made that an easier decision for me than it might have been for some others.
Before I finish and final words, I have a question to ask everybody. And if you've had a sneak clue with previous podcasts, you know what's coming, which is if you could take all your wisdom and experience you've got now and you could have a chat with your 23-year-old self yourself, and you just qualified as a young doctor, what advice would you give yourself?
It's a great question. I mean, it wouldn't be a short chat being me. I would say, but I'll try and limit it. I would say 23-year-old me, I'd definitely say go and work abroad, which is what I did, which was life changing and so helpful in ways that I just, could be another episode all on its own. So definitely that. And I think what that was speaking to was listening to self, like just not, I happened to get some advice at that time which said, don't go away. That's professionally irresponsible. You'll never work again in the NHS. And I just decided not to pay attention to it. And I'm so glad. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I would say, and I'm saying this to myself, but I'm also saying it to all the people that I've coached and all the places it's come up and all the imposter syndrome participants, is you're enough. And I think that this returns often enough in my professional world for me to see that this is a basic human wound. I don't think I'm particularly weird. I mean, I might be weird. I don't think I'm particularly weird in thinking this. I think it's really normal to really question whether you're okay or not, whether you're good enough at work, whether what you're doing is right or wrong. And I think that's magnified as a younger person when you're also trying to find your way and make a robust choice that works for you and all the rest of it. So I would say, just keep going and know that you're enough and follow your instincts, because I've had a pretty non-linear career path and I've enjoyed it. So that's been great.
The current generations coming through use a lot of WhatsApp, and actually the very latest Zoomers are instant messaging.
I was going to say, I think I'd challenge you on the latest generation being WhatsApp, because somebody's got two teenagers in her house. They only use WhatsApp to communicate with, and I quote, the old people, e.g. my husband and I, their grandparents. Their main method of communication between each other is largely on Snapchat, actually, which is instant, and also that protection of it being deleted. So you kind of don't have that somebody storing up years worth of correspondence between you. So but it is fascinating how in generations it does change.
So what's your feelings on staff WhatsApp groups?
Well, I think I've got a slightly cantankerous reputation amongst both my clinical department in the NHS and also amongst my colleagues who I work with at the College of Anaesthetists, because I am really against WhatsApp groups. I think WhatsApp is a tool to send pictures of your dog's children holiday to your family members. I don't think there's any role for WhatsApp in any kind of professional business arena. And I know, for example, in other industries, so in accountancy and banking, there's just a blanket rule on any kind of WhatsApp group amongst your workplace. Whereas in the NHS, we have many WhatsApp groups, of which some are, pictures of, I've made my son a birthday cake, what do you think? This is a picture of my children on the beach or whatever. And some are like clinically related. And it just makes me feel worried, because I think we have processes in place for all of these organizations where decisions are made in formal meetings that are usually minuted. You have a record of decisions that are made. And in parallel, you have loads of things going on in the departmental WhatsApp group, which is not minuted and there's no record of it. And I worry that in the future, we're going to end up in a problem where people are saying, well, when was that decided? And, oh, well, that was on the family or the, departmental WhatsApp. And, my husband and I run some wellness courses, and we were doing one a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about just this issue. And one of the doctors on our group said, well, we have a physicians WhatsApp group in my trust. And he's a gastroenterologist. And sometimes he'll get a message that will say, we just need a gastro opinion in bed 2 of AMU, please. And he's got some quite boundaries about WhatsApp, similar to myself. And he just doesn't respond. And then sometimes he gets reported for not replying to the WhatsApp group. And he keeps saying, well, show me the policy where our trust has decided that patient referrals now go through WhatsApp. That is bonkers. And not least that, you want to make sure that there's a record of these things, be it in the patient's notes or in any kind of decision making. And WhatsApp just doesn't provide that. And I think we have all been kind of lulled into a sense of security because we're so familiar with WhatsApp as a personal tool. And I'm not down on WhatsApp, it's fine, and other, messaging apps. But I think the fact that we've let it into our business and professional lives is the mistake. And I think we as doctors would be better for our own well-being to not engage in those groups. And I think as a sort of policy maker, I just think it's a real hazard that we haven't yet explored.
And I think that's the other really important thing, is that if you haven't already gathered a lot of people that are in your sort of mentoring and leadership pool, then again, prepare for your consultant job by sort of being very specific in terms of, I would really like to have you as one of my wise owls. And then obviously within your new working environment, you can gather up colleagues as you go in terms of who you're sharing an office with, who's you're potentially going to be working with, so I think that's the beautiful thing about, I've now been a consultant for 20 years. You gather up a whole load of different people. I just have more people to ask. That's brilliant. So there's something about that within the clinical role, particularly. To your point about the other things, and again, I think that's a trap we often fall into, aren't we? We're a brand new, shiny person. We want to be a people pleaser. We want to make sure we make a good impression. And let's face it, those of us who've been around for a little while sometimes see the opportunity of a new colleague coming into the department to offer the opportunity of something too that perhaps we're wanting to stop, get rid of. So I always suggest that actually, you don't have to say no, but you can say, I just want to spend the first 6 to 12 months getting my feet under the table in terms of my clinical role. Perhaps you could let me have that opportunity in a little bit of time, because actually, particularly if it's not yet in your job plan, just getting your head around managing a job plan is a new thing, isn't it? So yeah, the opportunities won't go away, but you can always hit pause on them rather than taking everything on to start with.
Can I come in there as well? Because I think we often give the narrative say no to everything. And I can sort of see the healthy part of that. But if I'd have said no to everything in the first thing, I wouldn't be where I was. And I think it's about being smart and, choosing the right opportunities. I think it's harder now, though, because when I started, I had 2.5 SBAs. I had so much. You could do that and you could absorb it. How do we help a new consultant who has been maybe given a 10-year job plan and is, before they know it, even with the current work, they're working well above that and they don't even realise that?
Yeah. So I think that comes down to actually making sure that as part, because of course, what I think is really fascinating about taking on a new consultant role is that all that you've known as a doctor in terms of educational supervision goes out the window. So the entire framework in terms of your support, that is all you have known since you were a foundation doctor, has then gone. Which is so one of the reasons that we locally give everyone a mentor when they first start. So a consultant or a SAS grade starting to the role has a mentor. Now it's a different relationship to the educational supervision, but actually it's someone that can kind of help as a guide. The real temptation with the job plan when you're a new consultant is everything. I think the thing that we sometimes underestimate is everything takes a little bit longer when you're a new consultant because you need to investigate things a little bit more. You're putting more thought into some of the things that we do automatically. You're perhaps using a bit more system 2 thinking because you're developing some of those routes in terms of those fast automatic decisions. Now, arguably, you sometimes make better decisions because of it, because everything is very cognitive and thoughtful. And that takes time and energy. And so what I suggest you do is have some mentors around you that are critical friends that perhaps you meet in 6 months' time or 9 months' time, and sort of say, okay, so how are you doing in terms of carving out your week, and how are you organising things? So I'm a big fan of the Eisenhower matrix. It's one of the very few things that I have always had on every single office wall. So if listeners aren't familiar with it, it's what's urgent versus not urgent, and what's important versus not important. And I have what I call blue time in my diary, which is what's important to me but not urgent. And I know that that's sort of like my predictor of stress, is that I know that if I then start overwriting that blue time in my diary with meetings or with other things, then I know that I then haven't got that really important critical space for me. It's the work equivalent to opening the laundry cupboard at home and the whole lot tumbling out at me. So there's something for me about what are you, when you've got a TNPA job plan and you're feeling very, very busy, what is it you're actually busy with? How much of it how much of it is urgent and important and we need to get on with it? How can we carve out some of that blue thinking time? And can we also, really important lesson to learn as a new consultant, what do we delegate? And what do we delegate in a supervisory way? So for example, we may delegate it to one of our registrars to do. And how do we properly delegate it rather than parallel do it anyway? So how do we properly learn, delegate, and give them the time and the thinking space, rather than often what we do, which is actually, we fall into the trap of thinking we have to do everything.
So we talked a little bit about job plans and carving out time within that space. Now, what's really important as well, I think from day one, and also as you progress through those first couple of years, is to really find what brings you joy at work. Because we can get bogged down in saying yes to things because that's what people think we'd be good at or that we'd like. But actually, what do we really enjoy doing? And start, even at those early stages, to think about, where do I see myself in 6 months' time, a year's time? And I think that's incredibly important, because sometimes you might do something and go, do you know what? I really enjoy rotas and I didn't think I would. And it's about trying different things.